Hello, all. Um, we all know that friendship is like is like a necessity for all of us. You know that friendship is a relationship that is based on mutual affection between people. It is a stranger form of interpersonal bond than an association, and has been studied in academic fields such as communication, sociology, and anthropology. And I think this is the only reason why we want a true friend. To tell you all about true love, true trust, and loyalty between two friends, I'm Reena Mishra from SGEC here to discuss our story after 20 years to you so that I could be able to disclose you the loyalty, trust, and love between two friends. Class 8. This is story after 20 years is penned down by William Sidney Potter. William Sidney Potter was born 1828 and died 1910. He is known by his pen name O. Henry, and trust me, he wrote amazing. He wrote extremely superb. He's one of my favorite story writers. He is credited for writing over 250 stories that are known for their surprise ending. He is widely known and appreciated for his short stories. I think very soon you people will read our story titled Last Leaf. Trust me, students, this story means mind blowing, very good, very emotional. And thus a story that we are reading is also that kind. This is also a classic literary piece of work. After 20 years is a story which revolves around an incident, and that incident takes place at around 10 p.m. along a dark, windy New York City business avenue. It begins with a policeman who discovers a man is standing in a dark doorway. The man then proceeds to explain why he is there. The author tells the story of Jimmy and Bob, two childhood friends who made a pact to meet up after 20 years. They made a pact to meet after 20 years at the appointed meeting time and location. And after 20 years, when Bob reached there at the appointed meeting time and location, a policeman, a policeman walks up and asks Bob what he is doing. Bob explains that he is waiting to meet with an old friend, and the officer departs. Later, Bob claims to be Jimmy arrives. However, the man is actually a different policeman sent to arrest Bob. Bob, who is a known criminal from Chicago. The original policeman was actually Jimmy. But he did not have the heart to arrest his old friend. It's approaching 10 o'clock on the largely deserted avenue in New York. A policeman walks his way up the street, carefully checking the locked doors of the business that have long since closed for the day. Suddenly, the officer of the peace encounters a man with an unlit cigar who is standing in the doorway of a hardware store. Congenially, the man tells the policeman that he is waiting for a friend whom he had agreed to meet with at that very spot 20 years ago that day. The waiting man strikes a match to light the cigar he is holding. And in the brief flash of illumination, the officer notes that the person before him has a pale, square-jawed face with her keen eyes and a little white scar near his right eyebrow. And on his scarf, there is a large diamond indicating great wealth. The man explains that he and the friend for whom he is waiting and to whom he called his best chum, Jimmy Wells, had been raised in New York like brothers. When they had grown up, Jimmy had remained in the city, but he himself had headed west to make his fortune. Upon taking leave of each other, the two friends had agreed to meet again in exactly 20 years to the hour. The waiting man pulls out a fancy watch that was embellished with diamonds. The officer idly comments that he must have done pretty well out west, and he expresses the hope that Jimmy, whom he remembers as having been a kind of plodder, has done even half as well. He is confident that his old friend will meet him that night, if he is alive. No matter what his circumstances may be, because Jimmy always was the truest, stanchest old chap in the world. The policeman continues on his way, and the man in the doorway keeps vigil as the fine rain begins to fall. After a short time, a tall character in a long overcoat with the collar turned up. He turned up to his ears and inquires hesitantly, "Is that you, Bob?" The waiting man exuberantly responds in kind, "Is that you, Jimmy Wells?" And the two grasp hands. The two friends exchange pleasantries. Then the waiting man proudly asserts that the West has given him everything he asked it for, while his counterparts say a bit less. Actually, students, the man who disguised as Jimmy was not actually Jimmy. He was the kind of policeman that was sent by Jimmy to arrest Bob. So the disguised man wanted to catch Bob. So he plotted this way. They both started to talk as "Is that you, Jimmy Wells?" cried the man in the door. "Bless my heart!" exclaimed the new arrival, grasping the other's hand with his own. "It's Bob." "Sure as fate. I was certain I would find you here if you were still in existence." These line expresses that Bob had firm faith that if Jimmy alive, he would definitely come there to meet him, to meet his old friend. Then 20 years is a long time, and the old restaurant has gone. And the man disguised as Jimmy wished that they both could have had another dinner there. And then Bob said, "You have changed lots, Jimmy." He said he had never thought him was so tall by 2 or 3 inches. "Oh, I grew a bit after I was 20. Then Bob asked the police, "Doing well in New York, Jimmy?" The two men started up the street, arm in arm. One was beginning to outline the history of his career, and the other, submerged in his overcoat, listened with interest. At the corner stood a drugstore that was brilliant with electric lights. When they came into this glare, each of them turned simultaneously to gaze upon the other's face. The man from the west stopped suddenly and released the other's arm. "You are not Jimmy Wells," he snapped. 20 years is a long time, but not long enough to change a man's nose from a Roman to a pug. Bob said, "It sometimes changes a good man into a bad one." You have been under arrest for 10 minutes, Sergey. Bob. The policeman said, Chicago thinks you. Chicago thinks you may have dropped over our way and wires us. She wants to have a chat with you. Going quietly, are you? And then he warned, before they go to the station, there was a note he was asking to hand to him. And the policeman gave this piece of paper to Bob and said that he might read it. It's from patrolman Jimmy Wells. My dear students, it is quite clear from the story that here Jimmy Wells now has become a patrolman, a policeman. Okay? A policeman, and Bob turned into a great criminal from Chicago. So almost each and every police wants to catch him. Even Jimmy Wells also. But when Jimmy came to know that Bob, the criminal was the same man whom he was waiting for, then he said that he did not have courage to arrest his friend. So what happened then? Then Jimmy Wells sent another man in a plain cloth so that they could recognize easily, so that Bob could be devised and he could get arrested easily. So, but somehow Bob caught this man and said that you are not my friend. You cannot be my friend because 20 years is a long time, but not long enough to change a man's nose from a Roman to pug. Then the policeman said, it sometimes changes a good man into a bad one. And he said he had been under arrest for 10 years. Then the man from the west unfolded the little piece of paper. His hand was steady when he began to read, but it trembled a little by the time he had finished. It was a letter from Jimmy to Bob, and the content of the letter was, the letter says, Bob, I was at appointed place on the time when you struck the match to light your cigar. I saw it was the face of the man wanted in Chicago. Somehow, I could not do it myself. So I went around and got a plainclothes man to do the job. And this way, the story ends. Actually, really, this story is all about love, trust, and loyalty of two friends. It shows a mutual affection between these two. It is a friendship. A friendship is really not an association. It is a form of interpersonal bond. With this, in this video, we are finished, but in our next video, we will be meeting with our next story or next poem. Till then, Goodbye, my students. Cheer up and study hard. Goodbye. Have a nice day.